Welcome to the Rough Characters podcast. I'm your host, Philip Overby.
I'm John Palladino.
And today we're going to be talking about media, books, games, TV, movies, whatever that we think more people should be talking about. This doesn't necessarily mean no one's talking about these things. It just means we think they should be in the uh, universe more frequently than they are mentioned, perhaps. And to lead into this, I have some news, and this is not a series that is underrated, I don't think. It's not a series that people never talk about because it's a very big series. And this is Persona 5, which I just recently bought. And I've been playing it every day, and I'm a big fan of the Persona series. And then I know you're not as into that kind of thing because you're not, from what I gather, you're not really into like the social aspects of those kind of games. Like I think Fire Emblem, you also had an issue with the kind of the minutia of all the little things you got to do.
So actually, it's funny that you brought that series up. I really don't like the Persona series,
Yeah, I figured that.
but the ironic part here is the social stuff in Persona is the only part of the game I actually liked. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, surprising, right? Fire Emblem, the last one that came out, I forgot. I think it was called Three Houses.
Yeah.
Is that right? It was just boring. The stuff that you had to do was so tedious. I'm actually a really big fan of the simulation slash social stuff if it's interesting. So in older Fire Emblem games, when you'd be like in a town or at your home base and you could like talk to your followers, and if you talk to like one enough, then you could like think you could get married in some of the older ones. That was fun.
Yeah.
Uh, in some other games, trying to think. Well, recently I played over the summer. I played my brother and his girlfriend came up here for forgot how long, a couple weeks. And while they were up here, we were playing Stardew Valley 3 player,
Oh,
and
yeah. I love
uh,
that game.
yeah, that's stupidly fun. It was actually kind of we each kind of latched on to our own activity. So aside from the social part, like I'd be trying to get married, and that I think that was fun in that game. But my brother was like the farmer, and he would manage all the crops and the animals, and then his girlfriend was really into fishing, so she'd go fishing and catch all the fish, and I always went into the caves and did all the mining and combat. It's kind of fun how that worked out. But no, Persona, I played um oh God. I think it was Persona 4. Um I I don't know if this character's in all of them, but I remember like there was like this cat character.
It
Is that
seems
in all of them?
it seems like there's a cat in all of them. There's
Oh,
definitely a
okay.
cat character in five because
Okay. I I didn't know if the cat was like a mainstay of the series or if it was just for like that one. But
yeah, I don't think it's a mainstay thing. But each series has some kind of like cutesy mascot kind of character
okay.
that guides you or something. It seems like.
Right. But I really liked the school. It was weird. I really liked the school stuff. I was really into that. But I really hated the whole other part of the game where you like the the whole combat was like which is weird because I like that type of combat normally. Uh, I'm not sure what it was about the game. I don't know if it was just the fact that it's really wacky. Like
Mm,
it was hard for me to take that like whole. I can't remember if it was like an other realm or what it was.
yeah, it's like a
Um,
you always go into some other like funny enough in Persona 5 it's called the metaverse, which is like Mark Zuckerberg's fucking thing.
uh,
He keeps sinking all the
that's
money into.
funny. Yeah, I think that's my biggest problem is that I just as a person have never liked the whole dream world, other realm type of thing. And so that kind of was like it's just not a game for me, I think, because of just of that, really. And it was kind of it's like weird and it's not serious and it's like just strange. I it's been so long that it's really hard for me to explain why I didn't like it
It's funny.
because it was a really long time ago.
It's funny that's words you describe it, and I describe it the same way, but in a
But
positive
you
way.
like it? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I like the weirdness and like the monsters you fight are just like bizarre, and there's like this. Um, but I've played other games in the series, and I think Persona 5 is probably the best one I've played, just in terms of the story and the I really like all the characters so far, and the combat is a lot more dynamic, I guess. Like there's some cool combo stuff you can do, which I always really love in games where your characters can like link up together and do some kind of uh special attack or something. They have this thing in Persona 5 that's called baton pass. And basically like if you hit an enemy and with like its weakness, you have the option to pass one of your allies instead of taking, because usually you get 2 turns if you do that, but you can pass to one of your allies, and if you do that, they get some kind of boost, like attack boost or something. So that's kind of a cool dynamic where the characters kind of play off each other. So I like that. Some of the combat stuff they added is pretty cool, even though it's still like a turn based game. Um, but I think the Persona series has kind of a hardcore following. I don't think it's the level of like a Final Fantasy or like a Dragon Quest or like a more mainstream title, but it does get a lot of mainstream
Yeah, a lot of people love that series.
attention. Anytime a new entry comes out, people are just like, ugh. Um, but I don't see the Persona series mentioned as much in like conversations about like what's the best RPG of all time, kind of thing.
Fair, but you don't think that Persona is the best RPG of all time.
I mean, if I took Persona 5 and measured it up against other RPGs, I don't know if I would say it's my favorite of all time, but it's the series itself is one of my favorite series. Um,
I looked it up, by the way. It was Persona 4 that I played.
yeah. So today we're just kind of talking about things that we like and we wish more people would talk about. And judging from past discussions, I'm going to assume most of my recommendations are going to be things you're probably not going to jive with as much because I'm just into the more weird, screwy kind of stuff. Um, whereas you're more of a serious, you're more into the serious kind of stuff. As far
Right.
as like fiction and like stories and stuff like that. I'm into more like oddball stuff.
Yeah, I'm also I think another difference between us is that uh I really, really struggle and dislike anything that's remotely like abstract or not really understandable or
Not ex
easily
not explicit.
yeah, just like I like it to be digestible in a pretty easily fashion. Like complicated books tend to like When I say complicated, I mean like writing style, not like the story is complicated. I like a complicated story. But if the writing is like uh really complicated for the sake of being complicated or vague, it's just I really struggle with that. Uh and I think that you tend to more like enjoy a lot of that.
Yeah, I think this might be this might explain a lot about me. Um, I tend to I tend to finish things that are more straightforward. But I tend to like things more that are weird and abstract, but I don't always finish them. So it's almost like
That's so weird.
it's very weird. So it's like if I went to a museum and I looked at Mona Lisa, uh you know, I would be able to look at stuff like that for longer. But I would actually probably like really weird, bizarre crap, but I don't know how long I could tolerate that. If that makes sense. Um, so starting off, there's an author I really like, Jesse Bullington, and also writes under the pen name Alex Marshall, which is what he writes his like kind of mainstream fantasy stuff under. Um, and
I've
uh,
never heard of this person.
so this is why I'm talking about him because uh, maybe some people have not heard either of his names. He is mentioned occasionally in conversations about like in the Grimdark group or uh, fantastical stuff, but his writing under his real name Jesse Bullington is very bizarre, very it kind of goes into like historical sections of time, but like it's very, very dark, very disturbing, goes into material that you wouldn't see in any kind of like mainstream fantasy. It is fantasy, but it's like historical fantasy.
Hmm.
So one of the books I read by him was called An Enterprise of Death, and it's about this young necromancer that's like in Spain or something during the Spanish Inquisition period. I could be getting this details wrong, but it's essentially the book has like graphic depictions of like uh, what's it called, necrophilia kind of stuff in
Oh,
it. So it goes like really out there. I mean, like as far as dark material, it's like dark. Um, but it's still captivating, like the way he writes these kind of things, like this um just the grisliness and like disgusting details of things he has a penchant for. uh I really envy writers that can do that. They can write really disgusting, terrible stuff, but like in a beautiful kind of way. um so his he's been in Grimdark magazine also before under the Alex Marshall name.
huh. I'm surprised I haven't heard of him.
um but his most famous book under his Jesse Billington name is the Sad Tale of the Brothers Grossbart, which was published in 2009, and it's about these two like grave robber brothers. And I think that's what brought, you know, people noticed him around then. And then the stuff he writes under the Alex Marshall name is a little more mainstream, uh, the way it's written, but it's also very creative, interesting kind of take on epic fantasy. So he's an author I always recommend to people if like they're looking for something just total, you know, a little bit familiar, but also very different.
Right.
He's not so far abstract that you're like, what the fuck's going on? But his style is very captivating if you're into like dark uh, kind of fiction. And his series, the epic fantasy series he writes, is starts with A Crown for Cold Silver, and the series is called The Crimson Empire. So if you're interested in some fantasy that's not doesn't necessarily follow all the typical tropes, but has enough familiarity, um, I often compare him to Joe Abercrombie also in a way because he has that kind of vibe a little bit, the Alex Marshall stuff. The Jesse Bullington stuff's a little further out there. So if you're not into like really grisly, disgusting details, then you might want to steer clear of that. But I always highly recommend both under both names, Jesse Bullington slash Alex Marshall.
Cool. I am surprised. I've never heard the names.
Yeah, you learned something new.
I did. Uh, are there other authors that you want to throw into the underrated or not talked about enough category?
Yeah, another author. I mean, he's dead now, but I've mentioned him before. He was like a big influence on George Martin. Is Jack Vance, and he's actually. I think I've talked about this before. Also, the name Vecna comes from rearranging the letters of his last name. So,
Oh yes.
the D&D magic system kind of came from him, almost like it was. I guess Gary Gygax was very inspired by this magic style. So like the idea of you memorize spells and you cast them and they disappear from your mind, you got to memorize them again, and naming spells and all these kind of things. It all kind of comes from Jack Vance. And his most famous series is like the Dying Earth. So he's most famous for that. And yeah, he's one of those authors that maybe not as many people know about, but he inspired a lot of people, and he influenced the fantasy genre in a big way. And I think he's someone that like if you're wanting to read the classics of fantasy but you don't want to read Tolkien or anything like that, I think he's a good person to read. But his style is not easy. So he's one of those that maybe people wouldn't like if they're not into like stuff that's a little bit weird or a little bit different. But George R. R. Martin uh, edited a book that was like a tribute to him. It's an anthology, which is also very good. So George Martin and Gardner Dozois, they both published this anthology called Songs of the Dying Earth, which I really enjoyed. So yeah, a lot of people were highly inspired by him, and uh, looking at the Wikipedia, George Martin even named a character in the game of or a Song of Ice and Fire series named Lord Vance. So there's
Yeah, I
actually
just
a minor
stumbled over
character.
that. That's funny.
So he's one of those that I listened to on audiobook when it came out on audiobook. And I really liked it. And I thought, man, you think all these like fantasy, people that get into fantasy, they get into fantasy because of Tolkien, or they get into fantasy because of, uh, George Martin or somebody like that. But you almost never hear of anybody getting into fantasy because of Jack Vance, and I think that's unfortunate because I think he's got a very unique voice. And if more people were reading him, we would get more fantasy that sounds different and doesn't just sound like a regurgitation of Tolkien's style.
Right.
So I guess he came from a period that was like the pulp, like the more pulpy period, like where uh, Robert E. Howard, the guy, he wrote the Conan series, and some of those writers were writing. So, um, yeah, I like his writing style a lot, and very inventive world. The idea that the Earth is dying and these people are living on this world, and everyone knows it's going to die. But it's like post-apocalyptic fiction without being post-apocalyptic, if that makes sense. It's like a
Right.
uh, fantasy world, but a lot of things are not explained. They're just kind of like, this is it. it's it's that kind of style. So you have to kind of just dive into it and uh,
This is
see.
you just you said a word and it triggered something in my brain. So you said pulp fiction area that you were talking about, like older books. And I was sitting here when you said that, I was sitting here thinking about older books, and it kind of led me down this trail of memories, uh, where I remembered an author that I did not have written down for this podcast. It was before we came on. I told you I was struggling to come up with authors that are are good, that we didn't think were talked about enough.
Yeah.
And I have one that I'll mention later that I did come up with, but when I was thinking back to my childhood, when you said that, I was like, who was I reading back then? And this author popped into my head. It's the earliest fantasy and sci-fi books that I can remember reading on my own. So like I grew up with my parents reading to me, and my mom often read like some fantasy books that I don't remember what they were, but I do know that I grew up listening to them. But the earliest one that I can remember actually reading myself was a book called Blade of the Poisoner by an author named Douglas Hill. And Douglas Hill was a fantastic author for I think I was like in 7th grade when I discovered him. And the library had 3 books of his. I'm on his Wikipedia right now because I wanted to remember their names. They had the Blade of the Poisoner, which is the first in a duology, and I never read the second book, and I always regret that. And then they also had 2 books out of a trilogy. Oh no, I messed up. They had 1 book called Exiles of Kolsek, which was a science fiction novel about humans that had to, I think they were like prisoners who were just kind of shipped off Earth and just sent to a random planet. If they survived, they survived. I might have that wrong. It's been a very long time since I read it. But the basic story was like they were trying to survive on this hostile planet with aliens and stuff. That was an awesome book. Um, I can't remember if they had the second book there or not. I know that I haven't read the whole trilogy though. And then I found this other trilogy that Douglas Hill wrote. It's called the Huntsman trilogy, I guess, but they only had Alien Citadel at the library, which is the third book in the trilogy. Um, I read that book. I love that book. And I did not realize when I read it, it's kind of funny when we were younger. It's just like you read what was around and you either liked it or you didn't, and that was it. I didn't even know that was the third book in a trilogy when I read that book. Um, but I found out about that a while ago. I was like, oh my God, no wonder I was kind of confused with how it started. But Douglas Hill, he's also dead. He actually died in 2007, which is the year I graduated high school. So, um, yeah, it was a while ago. Anyway, he was. I never hear anybody mention him. I don't think I've seen his name mentioned once in any book community that I have been in, and I've been in several for quite a while. So I don't know why I didn't think of him before the podcast, but I'm super glad that I did when you mentioned old books.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of him either, so that's interesting. So that might be a good. A lot of times, people might ask. My kid is starting to get into fantasy, so if you think that's a good entry
Oh
point
yeah,
for
yeah,
kids.
definitely. There was no swearing. I want to say there was no sex, but I there might have been allusions to sex, like off page, like, and I didn't even know if it was even said that like sex happened. It's been a really long time. I so I don't really know that regard. And then the violence was very PG, very like people died, I think, but I don't think anything was like overly described or gruesome. I think someone gets stabbed with a knife at some point that I remember, but I don't think it was like excessively drawn out or like described. It was in a library for kids, so it was pretty tame from what I remember. But I just remember really liking those uh those books. Actually, Douglas Hill, when I was on his Wikipedia, said he wrote for both adults and children, but I think primarily he focused on fantasy for kids.
Uh, okay, so I have one more I want to mention, and I think I've mentioned him several times also. Um, Maybe not on this podcast, but anytime somebody's like, "Hey, what's something cool I can read?" I always recommend China Melville, who is he's won just about every award that exists in fantasy. Uh, since we're using Wikipedia for research today, I'm just going to read all the awards.
I've
Arthur
heard of this person.
Arthur C. Clarke is he won the Arthur C. Clarke Award 3 times, British Fantasy Award, Hugo, Locus, World Fantasy, BSFA. So he's won pretty much every award there is in fantasy. And but for whatever reason, you don't see him mentioned very often. I think a lot of this has to do with I don't think he's on social media at all, and I think he's a very private person, so he doesn't really put himself out there. I think he's just kind of a writer and doesn't really
Right.
get involved in. I mean, maybe that's the reason. But he is kind of the blueprint for what I would like my writing career to be like in a way. Just the type of stuff he does. He writes a lot of standalone novels, which I've talked about before. I want to be standalone. I want to be called Standalone Phil or Standalone whatever.
Right.
I want to focus. You know, a lot of people write series, and that's cool, and I applaud people for that. But I think it would be cool if there was a fantasy writer out there that just wrote mostly standalones. That way, it would be more accessible for people that like if they like, for example, if they like my writing style, they wouldn't have to read a whole series. They would be able to have standalones. But he also wrote the Boss Log series, which is most famous for probably Perdido Street Station was the first in the series, and the world is just completely bizarre and weird, and like I can't even explain anything. But basically, one of the major plots in the first book is that he's trying to there's a scientist or something that's trying to fix some kind of birdman's wing, or he's trying to make a device so this birdman can fly again or something. It's like really weird, and he's even connected to the new weird movement in fantasy, which is kind of like a group of writers that they're not necessarily mainstream fantasy. They write kind of like the weird style that was probably popularized by like H.P. Lovecraft or some of those kind of people. Um, so I really like his style, and like every book is like a different, just completely different feel to it. And I really admire writers that can do that, that can still have their own unique voice, but do it in multiple genres and multiple worlds. Um, so if you're looking for someone that writes very unconventional fantasy, I highly recommend his stuff because it's just, I mean, he has one book called Rail Sea, and it's basically Moby Dick, but instead of whales, it's giant moles that go through the earth, and instead of ships, people have these giant trains that they follow these moles on and try to kill them with harpoons and shit. It's just like completely weird. Um,
That is very weird.
totally up my alley kind of stuff. So that's my last author recommendation. The only one other person I would recommend is Cameron Hurley, and she also fits into that kind of China Melville uh, camp, is where she writes kind of weird fantasy. Her book, The Mirror Empire, was really interesting for me. It was just like totally unique fantasy experience, and I can't think of any book that matches it in terms of the way it's written or the way it's executed. It's just like,
Yeah.
uh, you
I
know,
also never
I,
heard of her.
I'm really into that kind of stuff where I just read it and I'm just like, I've never experienced anything like this, and that's how I am with everything, like books, uh, you know, TV shows, everything. It's like if I feel like this is a completely new experience or completely new feeling, I get excited about that kind of stuff.
Right. Um, yeah, she sounds like she could be interesting. That was your last author, right?
Yeah,
I have I have one more author who I don't think is talked about that much from what I've seen. But Kevin Hearn, have you heard of him?
yeah, he does the Iron Druid, I think,
Yeah,
series.
Iron Druid. I've never read. It's urban fantasy, which I typically avoid. But I did read his new, the start of his new series anyway, A Plague of Giants, uh, which is a really interesting book because it's like, it's been a while since I've read it, so if I get any details wrong, I apologize. But basically, there's this like bard who is telling this story of a bunch of different POVs. So it's first person when you're in the present day with the bard, I think. Um, and then when he transforms. He's like a performer, so he transforms into these different characters that he's like telling the story as, and then you read that chapter from that point of view, and then I think it's third person. Um, but the story is really interesting, or it was. I have the second one right next to me. I still haven't read it because my endless pile of books to read. But that's an author I very rarely see talked about, and it seems weird to like hype up an author where you've only read one book by them, I guess. But I did really like it, and I've seen another person mention that they really like that book, and also don't think he's talked about ever. So I'm not alone in this. So that's why I brought him up, even though he's like super successful. It just seems like people don't really talk about him much, at least where I've been anyway.
Yeah, I know I used to see him mentioned a lot when people would request urban fantasy. But maybe we run in more traditional kind of
Right.
circles as far as fantasy goes. I don't think either one of us are really hard. Well, I've read urban fantasy and I like some of it, but I'm not like a hardcore urban fantasy person. I think I'm always interested in trying new stuff, but if it's more traditional fantasy, I tend to like that style better.
Yeah, I really don't like fantasy set on like Earth specifically. I think the only exception that I've actually enjoyed was Harry Potter, but like that was kind of a phenomenon all on its own, like uh just the way it's written really worked, I think. I just normally am not interested in reading about Earth in a weird like fantasy way. I do love like sci-fi though, like or post-apocalyptic stuff. Big fan of that kind of. If it's gonna be set on Earth, I like those more. I guess when it's fantasy, I kind of prefer like a new world. I guess.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. Like I like I like sci-fi that's based in our own reality that's possible, I guess. Whereas fantasy,
Yeah.
I prefer to be like a whole new planet or something, but not always. It just really depends on my mood and whatever.
Right.
So I wanted to mention one more thing. This is a series. I don't think this series is underrated at all. I think it's actually pretty well loved by a lot of people. I just don't understand why it doesn't come up as much because it's phenomenal. Black Mirror, which I think maybe you've talked about before.
Big
Uh,
fan of Black Mirror. I think that some episodes are pretty bad, and then most of the episodes are good to amazing.
yeah, I think in the realm of science fiction, uh, it's some of the best science fiction I've ever seen, and like
I agree.
I just don't understand why it's not in the mainstream as much. And it could be some of the content is pretty mature or pretty. I mean, the first episode is about the prime minister fucking a pig or something. So
Yes.
that, I mean, that's pretty out there. But like some of the episodes are like some of my favorite media ever.
There's a
Uh,
lot of ideas in that show that just make you think like, holy crap, can you imagine? And almost every single episode, I think the most brilliant thing about Black Mirror is almost every single episode could be the general story or world, like idea, I guess, for an entire show.
Yeah, you could make a whole show off almost, you know,
Yeah, almost every
all of
episode.
the all of the episodes. Yeah, that's what I loved about it. Like, I really love the social credit episode. I can't remember what it's called, but like it actually is a thing in China now, social credit. So where the girl is trying to her social credit's really good, and then the episode's called Nosedive.
Oh,
And
okay. Let me look that up real quick because I have a hard time remembering uh all the problem with that. Oh yeah, okay. I remember this one. Yeah.
so that's one of my favorite episodes because she's so careful about what she says on social media, or like, so people rate her and her interactions. And then like she's trying to, I think she's trying to get to a wedding or something, and like all along the way people are like 1 star, and she's like no, look, I have to get to this thing and I have to have at least 3 stars to get in or something. And then like right after that, I read some news like, hey, China's totally doing what Black Mirror episode out. I'm like, what the fuck?
I've heard about that. Um, but yeah, that was a good episode. There's so many fucked up episodes in that show, and it's awesome. I love it. But man, I really wish that some of those were like just shows. Like I don't know. I really liked the Star Trek episode. It was pretty great too. I had one of the just the ending of that episode made me cringe so hard. I was like, "Oh my god, no."
That's the one with the guy like is playing this kind of Star Trek game or whatever.
Yeah, he created like an alternate universe where he could be like
The
also
captain, yeah.
I think yeah, and I think like every single crew member in that was like an office employee that he like hated.
Oh yeah,
um but yeah, that's a fantastic show. I really hope that we get a season 6, I think.
yeah. I
I
think
think
there's
there's
been
5 seasons.
5. And they
Yeah.
did you do that interactive movie? I
I
think.
fucking hated that. Oh my god, it was so boring.
What was it called? Bandersnatch.
Yeah, I hated that. I was so excited for that, and I was like, this is trash. Oh my god, this is so bad.
The season 1 stood out to me, like the I think all 3 episodes in season 1 were just like complete fucking great. I really like the one, the I think it's the entire history of you, where they can rewind uh
Oh my god, that one was
argu-
amazing.
arguments and shit.
Yes, I love that one so much. That was gold. That was one of my favorites. It was just you you could rewind and like see everything. I love that one. Honestly, I
Yeah.
love almost every episode. I really liked I
There's
mean all of
I can't think of any right offhand that I completely hated, but I'm sure there, if I
there
look.
was one in season 4, I think. Black Museum. Yeah, I did not like that one. My brother, I think that's my brother's favorite episode, and I just didn't like it. I don't
uh
remember it though, like at all. So,
Another really good one was is it the one where it's like, I think Hang the DJ, about the people experiencing like a whole relationship, but it was all like a simulation that was done in like 5 minutes on an app or something. It was something like that.
oh yeah, that one. Man, they're so good. There was man, that one was kind of creepy. It was the one where her husband dies and then she gets that like AI. Yeah, it was Be Right Back.
Oh, yeah. There
And
are.
controversially, I know this is a huge controversial pick, but I absolutely loved um the Miley Cyrus episode.
I
So
actually,
many people hated that. I
I actually,
loved that one.
yeah, I actually like that one too.
That song was so fucking catchy. I don't even care. And like the toy, I don't know. I thought that was a great episode. People hated season 5, and I remember loving season 5. Of course, season 5 was only 3 episodes, so like, you know, that
Yeah,
sucks.
I think most of them are very short seasons. There's not,
Yeah, it's like
but
season 3 and 4 had like a bunch of episodes. Well, I say a bunch, and it was really only 6 each, but
yeah,
the other ones were like 3 and 4 and stuff.
I just think if they're not going to do Black Mirror anymore, then
They
like,
are. I do believe season 6 was confirmed.
oh, okay. Well, I was just saying, like, if somebody, if he decides to stop doing it, somebody needs to do something like it because, like, we need science fiction like this that's like so
Oh,
close to reality, so close to
yeah,
like what our real experiences might be.
it's so good.
It's
Uh,
scary. Like,
I think that I read somewhere. I could be wrong. I'm going based off of memory here, but I think that there was some sort of rights issue after Netflix acquired Black Mirror,
uh,
which seems strange to me because Netflix had 3 seasons of it, and that's why there was a big delay between seasons 5 and 6. Was there's like this rights issue, and I can't remember specifically what happened or why now, but
yeah.
I do remember there was like this big battle of some sort where like they were unsure if they were ever going to be able to make Black Mirror on Netflix again. I do believe that's been resolved though, and they
Mm.
are going ahead with season 6. I wish I remembered the specifics, but I can't off the top of my head, and I don't want to say anything that's incorrect. And I might have just said something incorrect.
Well, that's all the things I have. Was there
Oh, I
anything
have
else you have?
yeah, I have a tabletop RPG and a couple video games. So which one?
How about the tabletop game?
All right, so the tabletop game, you're familiar with, and a lot of people probably are. It's a it's a system that I think is used a lot, but no one ever mentions it or talks about it, and that's Savage Worlds.
Yeah.
Like I see people talking about role playing games all the time, and I see every name, even way more obscure games, but I never see anyone mention Savage Worlds. And it's like such a good system. I love the system for that game. I don't play it that much, but I have played it before, and I think it's very awesome.
Yeah, I like I've actually strangely enough, I've actually have a game that I made for my class that slightly borrows from the Savage Worlds idea of like upgrading your dice. So I'm doing kind of like a Pokemon style game for my class.
Oh,
And
nice.
students can like use their points that they get while playing the game to like buy new. I call them Overmon because my name's Overby, so Overmon.
Oh,
And they can buy new ones, and the new ones have like upgraded dice on different skills. So like there's like an attack skill, and if you have the basic Overmon, it's like you roll a d4. But if you buy like a better one, your attack can be a d6 or a d8 or something like that. So I love that about Savage Worlds, the upgrading the dice kind of thing.
yeah, it feels so good. It's so much better of a feel. Like when you upgrade, you level up in Dungeons and Dragons, and it doesn't. Sometimes it feels like, wow, I'm gonna be so much more powerful now. But not really. When you like compared to Savage Worlds, when you level up in Savage Worlds, first of all, the choices between what you pick for leveling up in that game are really hard. And it's such a struggle. And I think that's like a sign of like really good choices right then. Because you're like, oh man, I could do this. I could upgrade my dice. I could get a new ability. There's so many things to choose from. What do I do? But no matter what you pick, you feel like a huge, awesome upgrade. Like, and the upgrading your dice just feels fantastic. I don't know. There's just something about that system that like works stupendously well, and I don't think enough people talk about
I think D&D just covers the landscape so much when people talk about tabletop games. It's like uh, uh, going back to what I've talked about before about just consuming everything just so I have options. When I got into like designing my own game, uh, I just bought like every fucking book that like
it.
people
Right.
had a vaguely good impression of. I was like, cool, I'm gonna buy it and read it and check it out. So I have all these like tabletop games I bought that I haven't played yet, and I've kind of just skimmed so far.
Yeah, you know, I've played several of them, but
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's good to have at least one or two people to try different games out with, just to see like if you like it or don't like it. I think we experienced that with when we played Savage Worlds a little bit. I really like the system, the upgrading the dice, and it even
yeah,
I think I even adapted some of that upgrading dice stuff to my own game that I was working on. Um, and then there was a lot of stuff in Blades of the Dark that I liked. I mean, there's stuff that I like that I take from games, and then I learn, okay, I like that about that game. So, um, like more Borg, I learned I love the wackiness of the character creation, and there's just fun making a character. Playing the actual game itself was a little hit or miss, I guess, but um, yeah, Savage Worlds kind of stuck in my mind also, just how versatile it is.
yeah, it's it's just so different compared to a lot of tabletop role playing games. I think that's why I liked it so much. Is that your upgrades had like an actual immediate effect that you could see on the actual mechanics. You know, instead of rolling a d6, now you're rolling a d8, and it just feels immediately impactful.
What?
And that was so cool.
Yeah, even when I was playing a game with my students last week, and it was a kind of basic exploration game where they were like on an ocean or something, and if they move onto the ocean tile, they would flip it over and see what the result was, and sometimes they would find treasure. And I remember the first time somebody got like a treasure, and the treasure said roll D20, and they picked up the D20. And it was like the first time these students have ever seen a D20, and they were just like, "Whoa!" Like, what the hell? Like they had seen six-sided dice their whole life, but a D20, they were just like, "Whoa!" And then when they rolled it and they got like a 18, they're like 18, whoa! So they got really excited about the bigger dice. So
Right.
Savage Worlds has that same thing. Even the probability goes up, you're gonna be stronger. Doesn't always necessarily mean. I mean, you could still roll one. I mean, I had students roll one on the D20 the other day, and it's like, they're like, yeah, D20, and they rolled it and then got a one. I was like, oh,
That's always rough.
now you know what a critical fumble feels like.
Right. So I guess moving on to the video games that I have to mention. Um I have one that might be a hot take. So I'm gonna do that one first because I don't want to end on like a hot take. So there's this game that is super, it's big. A lot of people know about it. Most people hated it. I absolutely, I was going to say I absolutely loved it. I really liked it. I had some qualms with it, but Mass Effect Andromeda. Oh, yeah, everyone hates that because there were some technical issues with the game and almost got Mass Effect like just shelved permanently. Fortunately, they continued to make. They're working on number 5 now, but because of how negative the reception was, they stopped developing DLC for it, and they canceled their plans to start like a sequel to it. And I know a lot of people hated it, but oh my god, without the faces, which was the big controversy, without the faces and some of the glitches of the walking, that game was gorgeous. Just the environments were amazing. The armor was great. Everything in that game was awesome. I have some qualms with like maybe some of the story, maybe a lot of the companion characters were not like my favorite. But I think that game is only talked about in an extremely negative light. And I couldn't disagree more. I think it's a solid game and it looked spectacular outside of the famous animation issues, which were for the faces, which was so true. It was so awkward to see that in such an otherwise like polished game. So weird. Have
Um,
you never played that game though, did you?
no, I think I was really excited for it. I was one of those that was like, I was one. I did Mass Effect 3, and I choose red, yellow, or blue uh ending, and felt kind of, well, I don't think any of the decisions I made actually impacted this at all.
Right.
But at the same time, I didn't walk away from Mass Effect 3 thinking, oh, I fucking hate Mass Effect now. I was looking forward to Andromeda, and just, I think I had kind of shifted away from playing console games as much by that
Uh,
point. And so I wasn't, and then once I started seeing all the negative stuff about it, I think that affected me getting
yeah,
it.
it's too bad because it was. I know again, this might be a hot take. I just thought it was a really fun game for gameplay purposes and exploration purposes. Uh, I won't fight anyone that says the story was shit. I, I didn't think it was terrible. I don't think it was as good as the other ones. My biggest problem was definitely the companions. I didn't feel connected to. I don't think it's been a while since I played it, but I don't remember really liking too many, if any, of the companions, which is like a huge highlight of Mass Effect. So that's like kind of a big downer. But um, to be fair, I didn't like a lot of the companions in
The other ones.
Mass Effect. I can't remember. There was a specific game. It was either 2 or 3, and one of them, I was like, ugh, I don't want like Tally again,
Yeah.
which is a big. That's a hot take. A lot of people love her. I'm never a fan.
I think
Um,
people like Tally because she's like mysterious, and like the voice actor is pretty good. So I think people kind of like
yeah,
her
I
vibe.
just I got sick of like the same companions. Tally, Liara again. Another one that I was just never understood.
I never liked Liara much.
Yeah. So yeah, the companions are depending on the game, it's a hit or miss for me. But and for Andromeda, I remember it being an enormous miss when it came to the companions. But oh my god, the rest of the game, I just really liked it. Uh, it's a little late now, but I still think you should play it. It might
I
have not,
mean,
been super. It might not be super great to look at nowadays, but I remember the graphics being awesome. Aside from the obvious issues that you've heard about.
if they ever do a Twitch port, or not Twitch, Switch port, that's a
Oh yeah.
good possibility. I just don't see myself these days having time to play console games. I'm just
Fair enough.
very handheld at the moment, I guess.
I get that. So
I mean,
that's my. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
they have Skyrim on Switch, so I mean,
Right.
I don't see why they can have Mass Effect.
I just don't. I The reception to that game was so bad. I can't imagine they spend the effort to make a port for it because who's buying it?
That's true.
Uh, I might be wrong, but
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
think so.
I mean, if they did a remastered like Mass Effect series, sometimes they do these remaster blah 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 series like they did the Grand Theft Auto games recently. Um, I never thought they'd have Grand Theft Auto on the Switch, but it's there. I mean, I heard it has quality issues, but
Yeah,
if
I
you want
don't
to
know.
play it, if you want to play it, it's there. I don't
Yeah.
know.
So I mean, I've always been a huge Mass Effect fan. So there's rumors. Those not rumors. Amazon bought the rights to make a TV show of Mass Effect. Whether or not they actually make one, who knows? I'm super excited and hopeful that they do. Because if there's one thing I've always wanted in my life, it was a mature Star Wars show, which I don't know will ever really come to fruition the way I want it to, but Mass Effect is literally that mature Star Wars.
Is the Expanse kind of like that? I've never watched it.
No, oh man. Okay, so here's a quick hot take, which is really kind of a tangent, but you brought it up, so it's your fault.
Sorry.
I tried to read the Expanse novels, and I read two or three of them. I can't give you my opinion on them because it was so long ago. I remember not liking them that much, but liking them enough to continue, and then obviously I didn't continue, so how much did I like them? I don't know. The TV show, everyone loves it. I think it's terrible. I watched again. I watched quite a bit of it though. I watched like two, three, maybe 4 seasons, 3.5 seasons. I can't remember.
You
So
watched
I watched,
four
dude. I
seasons of
watched.
something you hated.
Yeah, I watched a lot of it because I was thinking it would be good, and it looked good. But The Expanse has. Okay, I'm being overly critical because of things that I require in my media. So, to the listeners out there, if you like The Expanse, that's perfectly okay. My problem with The Expanse is just, to me, it felt like all the main characters were basically invincible superheroes. I mean, they're not superheroes, but like they just feel like nothing's ever going to kill them no matter what happens. And that was like my biggest problem with it. It's just no one ever got hurt. So like that was my big thing that like is why I don't like it. Otherwise, I will say the quality of the actual show is amazing. The Amazon did a. I can't remember if that was Amazon actually. I think Amazon picked it up. I
Yeah,
don't think they ever
it
did
was
the original.
Netflix originally, and then I moved to Amazon, I think.
Okay. Either way, they did a good job with it, but it's not for me. Anyway, tangent over. Let's go to my non hot take, I think, video game that is never talked about, and there might be a reason for that. So I don't know if you've ever heard of this game, but and the reason why it might not be talked about is because it literally came out in 2008, and it's an indie game, and it won. I think it won quite a few awards at the time, but and it might very well have been talked about a lot online, but back then I didn't have internet very good anyway. So I wasn't really online until 3 or 4 years later, I think. Anyway, it's called Braid. Have you heard of it?
Great. Yes, I think I have heard of that actually.
So for people that don't know what Braid is, it is a platform puzzle game, I believe. It's not really an RPG. Basically, it has like a fantasy skin to it, but it's not really a fantasy game. Uh, it's set in like a fantasy universe, and there's like not much storyline, but there is storyline, and the small amount of storyline that there is it's spectacular. I'll just say that right now. It doesn't, you don't think it's spectacular, you won't think it's spectacular until the very end. And there's this massive twist that happens that I'm not going to spoil, that I don't know if it would do it to me now because I was much younger then. Maybe now I wouldn't be surprised, but when I got to the end, when I beat that game, I was so stunned with the big reveal that my jaw almost hit the floor. I swear to God, it was just such a insane surprise. What a amazing twist that game has. Gameplay, not my thing. Didn't it's I don't really like puzzle games. I don't like platforming games.
That's the game where you can rewind time and stuff, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But oh my God, if you beat that game, it is just a shocking reveal. And it's in a small, short indie game, so I don't imagine many people would talk about it more. But for that category, it's, in my opinion, like the best.
Well, speaking of shocking reveal, let's move on to the shocking reveal that I'm going to be fighting something in the arena.
Yes. So BB over our. You're a wizard, right?
Yes, I'm a
Okay.
wizard.
It's always hard to remember what someone is when they're either a wizard or a sorcerer because they're just so the same.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna have all the massive D&D fans coming at me, but they are the same. Damn it!
Mm, that's a conversation for another day. All right.
Anyway, you are going to be fighting a wyvern,
Oh boy.
and yeah, these things are pretty cool. For anyone that doesn't know, it's basically a dragon that doesn't have a breath weapon.
All right. I'm rolling initiative.
All right, the wyvern beat you in initiative.
You.
All right, so it gets has multi attack, so it's going to try and bite you, and also it's going to try and sting you with its the barb on its tail.
Great.
So your armor is what, 12?
Yes.
This might be the shortest fight your wizard has. So it does 8 damage. You're still up, right?
That's it.
Well, it has its stinger coming at you now too.
That's it.
Well, let's see what happens here. Oh, it just got a nat 20.
Oh, great.
You cursed it. You fucking said that's it. That was
That's
really
it.
bad.
Come on. Bring it.
All right, so you take uh double damage here for piercing damage. Oof. All right, so 13 piercing damage plus you have to make a constitution saving throw and take 7d6 poison damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one.
All
Plus
right.
you got a nat 20, so I think that I can't remember if nat 20s actually affect the poison effect too, though.
Okay, I'm dead already. So
Okay, well, that the shortest? No, you had one other fight where you only lasted 1 round, and that was against your first fight.
Yeah.
So you've had a pretty good run here until you had a 1 round battle. It's pretty
Well,
good for the wizard. So you have 1 round, which means you get a mundane item.
I
Which
roll. What should I roll?
it's uh it's the one where you have to go to that link. It's in that
Uh,
handout. Yeah.
Mundane items. All right. Well, I didn't even get to warm up my
No, you didn't get to do anything. That's sad.
thing.
So
That's
that was
a
a challenge rating 6, I think it was.
okay, and we take the first one.
Yeah, that's what I usually do.
I got a blob of iron and 5 iron nails. What the fuck does that even mean? A blob of iron.
That seems like an oxymoron, right? If it's iron, it wouldn't be a blob, right? It would be hard.
I don't know.
A blob, I mean, unless you're literally getting melted iron.
It just sounds
Everyone
like
out there listening is like, what the fuck are you guys rolling
a,
off? It's just a
sh-
random generator. It's not
a,
like a
a shapeless clump of iron, I guess. Well,
yeah,
that seems pretty apt for this battle. Here you go. Here's a shapeless piece of shit.
yeah, a fitting reward for a dismal performance, I think.
Well, it's good because this episode was a little long, also. So kill me quickly.
Yes.
All right. Well, that wraps up another episode. Thank you for listening again. If you're interested, please go pick up John's book, The Trials of Ashmount, at your local Amazon. And if you're interested in other content, go to negative-hp.com where you can check out these podcast episodes will also be there, as well as the other usual podcasting places that you can find. And if you want to chat about grimdark fiction with us, go to Grimdark Fiction Readers and Writers on Facebook, and you can join in the conversation. Until next time, I hope you don't get a blob of iron for Christmas. Thank you. Goodbye.